the body positivity, it's a huge movement. And I'm assuming
Yeah.
for people with eating disorders or people that you work with, it can feel overwhelming or even shaming if someone is in recovery. Like, how does body neutrality offer maybe a different or more accessible path for someone?
This might be my most favorite topic because I remember when I first learned about or first had body neutrality introduced to me, it felt so foreign. And so like, no, what? There's another option? It's really like a lifeline. Like, thank you. I have needed this because when an individual is so stuck in body negativity and they hate themselves, they hate their bodies, it to then try to tell them to love themselves unconditionally and they should celebrate their body, that's a huge task. That is asking so much of the individual. And I remember feeling that way. Like, you're telling me I have to just love myself? I can't stand myself. How could I possibly get there? And so it further kept me stuck in body negativity. And I see this happen a lot with individuals that I work with. And so I like to view it as body negativity is at one end of the spectrum, body positivity is at the complete opposite end, and then body neutrality is obviously right in the middle. It's that neutral stance. Body positivity, I want to be clear, it's a beautiful idea. It's a beautiful movement. And if that resonates with you, incredible. I love that for you. And I think it's great if that's what stands out. But for a lot of people, it's so unreachable that it keeps them stuck because it feels like, well, I'm never going to get there. So this is familiar. Body negativity is familiar. I'll stay here. Body neutrality is this idea that you don't have to love yourself. You also don't have to hate yourself. It's celebrating or even just honoring. Sometimes celebrate can feel like too big of a reach. It's honoring your body's function, respecting what your body is capable of. And it is leaning into, okay, what are these cool things that my body does all day, every day that I might not even know about? It's not even just celebrating. Sometimes I see people put body neutrality automatically into activity, like celebrate that you can go lift weights or go for a run. Okay, I love that. But that might perpetuate this idea that you need to value those things. Body neutrality can just be, how cool is it that you can breathe? And how cool is it that I read this in a book a little bit ago. It was talked about how our skin is water resistant. And Podge, I had this moment of like, whoa, I have never thought about that. I mean, obviously, I know this, but I had never really given it thought. And that falls under the idea of neutrality. It's just looking at, okay, wow, these bodies are pretty incredible with what they can do. And we don't have to focus on what they look like. And sometimes body positivity can land a little bit too much in that space of celebrating what they look like and then loving everything about the way they look. And at the end of the day, you aren't going to love everything about your body. It doesn't matter who you are. There's always going to be something that makes you uncomfortable about your body. And neutrality is saying, that's okay. You don't have to love it, but it's also not helpful to hate it.
It is what it is almost. It's in the name, right? It's a very neutral or balanced approach to what your bodies actually
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
How do you work with clients to begin supporting them around the idea of body neutrality?
It's difficult. It's a difficult process cultivating a mutual relationship with your body. And so I encourage people to really meet themselves where they're at and bring awareness to the way that they speak to themselves. That's a lot of the initial steps is, okay, you can't change the narrative thoughts that you have about yourself if you don't even know you're having them. And so it's first bringing that awareness to, okay, how do you speak to yourself? What are these thoughts that you're having about yourself? And not getting stuck in just that, because if we just stay in the awareness, that's not going to get us anywhere. If you're like, yeah, I know how badly I speak to myself. Okay, but let's now get curious about okay, how can we start to shift that? And so a big part of that is self-compassion. It's learning how to speak to yourself like you would a friend. It's learning how to be willing to be okay with the body that you have. And, Podge, I'll even backtrack a little bit there on it being okay. I think another space is focusing on acceptance, accepting the body that you have, knowing that acceptance actually doesn't even mean that you're okay with something. And I think sometimes that's a misunderstanding that we think, okay, if I accept it, that means I'm okay and all is well. No, sometimes you have to accept something that really sucks and that you don't want to have to accept. But acceptance is you saying, okay, I see the situation clearly. I see it for what it is, and I'm not going to fight with it. I'm not going to struggle with this. And so that can even be body neutrality, is working to accept it, man, I feel so uncomfortable in my body. And here I am. I'm going to be present for this experience. I'm going to learn how to tolerate the discomfort and sit with it until this gets to be less intense. And when I say it gets less intense, getting at this idea of if you're having that wave of shame about your body or thinking your body needs to be different.
I had a conversation, or I did a podcast on Noom Vibe earlier today, actually, and it was around the idea of toxic positivity. And a very similar concepts have come in just from listening to my listeners. Right? I think we live in a society where we'll say happiness is probably the only normalized emotion. Like if you're feeling sadness or shame, or we'll say something you associate as a negative. We associate it. I think I've kind of made my own case there. We associate it as a negative and you shouldn't be doing it. So people might respond, oh, just be positive or look on the bright side. And that is the last thing someone probably wants to hear when they're in the middle of the shit. You know, they just want to have you sit beside them and just leave them process their emotions. And it sounds like a similar concept here, that there's no good, there's no bad emotions. Like they are what they are. You have to feel them. It's human to do that. It's actually not human to suppress them and keep them suppressed for as long as you can. That's just something we've seemed to have developed over the last, I don't know how long, just due to society. Probably goes back further than what I'm thinking in my head. I think that's what you're getting at with body neutrality too. It's having that understanding of awareness, like, yeah, like this sucks. This is not a good feeling, rather than I shouldn't be feeling this. I need to be feeling happy. Push it down type of idea.
I love that you're bringing in toxic positivity or even emotional regulation with that too, because I do think that there is absolutely such thing as toxic body positivity, and that you can never feel uncomfortable in your body. You can never feel unsatisfied with your body. And that's so inaccurate. Our bodies, we're going to feel different in our bodies day to day to some extent. And so many things impact the relationship we have with our bodies. And so it's showing up for whatever that is and whatever emotions you're experiencing about your body, or even just showing up for the emotions that we all have to feel. Because whether you want to feel it or not, it's there. We all have to feel all the emotions out there at one point or another. And so body neutrality is learning how to show up for that when they're specifically about the body. If you look in the mirror and there's something about your body that you don't like, for one, you're human. There's going to be things about yourself that you don't like 100% of the time. And rather than lean into diet culture and say, okay, I need to fix that, body neutrality and anti-diet says, no, how do you show up for it? Instead of feeling like not liking this about your body means that it needs to be changed and that it's wrong. Maybe not liking that about your body shows that you're human and you have a body. And how do we instead show up for that and speak to ourselves like we would a friend in that moment, and not go into toxic positivity and say, oh my gosh, no, you are so beautiful. You are so whatever it is. Those are nice thoughts. But what if it was just, it is hard to have a body, and just sit with that and show up for the emotions that come up, breathe through it, be compassionate, be aware.
Yeah, it's so important, I think, to just acknowledge all emotions, really, than picking and choosing ones that we want to. And one aspect actually we haven't brought up yet, Maddie, and you mentioned that you have a background in yoga as well. And that kind of leads me to this whole idea of like joyful movement. Like, how can joyful movement, things like yoga, help someone to be able to reconnect with themselves?
Movement can be such an important part of reclaiming your relationship with your body. And I think a lot of times I describe it as, when I'm talking to clients about this, is that we have such a disconnect between our mind and our body. And it's almost like we have this barrier underneath our head. It's like, you don't even know what's going on with your body. You don't know how you feel. You don't know anything. You just think you have all these thoughts about your body, but you're not actually sensing in the body. I mean, thinking isn't a sense. Sometimes I think we get tripped up and think it is, but we feel so disconnected from our bodies, which is mind-blowing to me because we live in our bodies all day, every day. We rarely actually know what's going on. And so that's where movement comes in, is it introduces this way to connect with your body. And remember that you have a body. You have this body that can be moved. I'm very biased about yoga because I am a yoga teacher, and yoga has been a part of my life for 15, 16 years now. And why I like yoga specifically is because it consistently fosters this idea of a mind-body connection, and that you cannot separate them when you're moving. You are aware of your body, you're aware of your breath, and your breath exists in your body. And so that's automatically connecting you with the body. But looking at joyful movement on a larger scale, it's the simple idea that to move can be joyful, to move can feel good in your body. And I think diet culture has really pushed this idea that you have to move and you have to exercise in a way that you hate. You have to, there's like no pain, no gain, and like all of these really like catchy phrases out there that I think have pulled us so far away from our bodies. And so joyful movement brings forward this idea of what if you checked in with your body and saw how it felt when you moved? And if that movement ends up being weightlifting or running, great. You don't have to just do yoga, but do it with intention. Do it because it fosters the relationship and a connection with your body. Don't do it because some external source told you that you have to do that to look a certain way, because you're not going to be motivated to do it, for one. And also, you're going to further disconnect yourself from your body and further build a lack of trust in your body. Joyful movement brings you back to, what does it feel like to move my body in a way that feels joyful, in a way that feels connected, rather than tuning out. I think joyful movement is a way to tune in to the body.
I like what you said about we're kind of almost told what it means to exercise. Like you have to hit whatever your 3 to 5 days in the gym, you have to do a spin class, you have to do like whatever it might be. Pilates would actually probably be a good one, folks, for the mind body connection. But it's dictated to us in a sense, right? My words of encouragement or maybe experience at this stage, if people are trying to engage in like mind body connection type movements like yoga, would be to give it some time, give it a chance. And the reason I say that is because yoga is a very good example, right? It's especially yin yoga. Highly recommend that for anyone to try, but it's such a change of pace to, one, what we're told exercise is supposed to be, but then two, to just our lives in general. So you might be like me, and when you start incorporating yoga or any joyful movement that we'll say is slightly outside of a sphere of what you think you should do, the change of pace can be hard. You can be feeling like it's having any benefit. Your mind could be going in a million different directions. You might be struggling to concentrate, and you might just say, oh, this isn't for me. But that's just you're almost like tapping into your parasympathetic nervous system when we spend so much of our time in our sympathetic, like fight or flight, go, life is busy, loads of stresses. And so my advice would be just to give it a chance, give it a bit of time, and see how you like it. Then you still might land and say that's not for me, but I think it is important, especially nowadays when it comes to activities like yoga, to give them a little bit of time.
Yeah, you sent my mind down so many paths there, because when you said like you might show up and it's really hard to be present, your mind is racing, I would say welcome to your body, because that means you're listening. That means you actually are noticing what's going on. That doesn't mean it's comfortable. In fact, that's incredibly uncomfortable. But then you learn, and it takes a lot of time. So doubling down on your idea of stick with it, you learn how to manage that, because that's going to be with you for life. The racing mind is part of being human. And so we then need to learn how to manage a racing mind, how to show up for the uncomfortable things that come up in the body. And I think when I didn't have a mind-body connection, for me, that I was running a lot and I was lifting weights, because for me, those things disconnected me from my body, and they let me not have to hear all the noise in my mind. And so I ran a lot because I had a lot of noise in my head. I still do enjoy running, not to the same extent as I used to, because I realized, I don't have to run from these thoughts. I don't have to run from these emotions. Turns out I can learn how to handle these emotions and manage them. And I can learn how to manage a racing mind. And for me, it was yoga. It helped me learn how to do that. Doesn't mean that yoga is the right one, but I'm with you, Podge, that sometimes you got to stick with it. And those thoughts are your body, your mind, all of it communicating with you.